By 2087, humanity was buzzing with excitement. Decades of dreaming and tinkering had finally paid off in a big way. Imagine this, a weapon so powerful that it could fire projectiles faster than the speed of sound, capable of tearing through steel. Like paper. This wasn't science fiction anymore. It was real. The world stood on the edge of something revolutionary, thanks to the hard work of one brilliant mind. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a quiet but determined scientist from Mexico City, became the face of this breakthrough. She spent years buried in research. Labs scribbling equations on whiteboards and running countless simulations. Her dream? To harness electromagnetic energy to create a weapon unlike anything the world had ever seen. And she did it. In 2086, her team unveiled the first working prototype of a railgun, a sleek, futuristic device that looked more like something out of a movie than a military arsenal. At first, people were skeptical. Could this really work? Was it safe? But skepticism turned into awe when they saw the railgun in action. During its first public demonstration, held at a remote desert testing site, the crowd watched in stunned silence as the railgun fired a small metal slug over 10 kilometers away. It hit its target, a reinforced bunker, with such force that there was nothing left but rubble. The explosion echoed for miles, leaving everyone speechless. Some cheered wildly, while others stared in disbelief. One thing was clear. The game had changed forever. Word spread quickly about this new marvel of technology. Governments around the globe couldn't ignore what they were seeing. Military leaders started imagining all sorts of possibilities. What if armies could take down enemy tanks without firing a single bullet? Or sink battleships from hundreds of kilometers away? Space agencies even got excited. Maybe railguns could help launch satellites into orbit cheaper and faster than rockets. The potential seemed endless. Soon enough, countries began pouring billions into developing their own versions of the railgun. Factories sprang up overnight, churning out these advanced weapons by the thousands. Armies trained soldiers to operate them. Strategists drew up battle plans centered around their use. And politicians boasted about how their nations now had the ultimate advantage. Countries rich enough to afford railguns suddenly found themselves holding all the cards. Smaller nations, however, were left scrambling. Without access to this cutting-edge tech, they felt vulnerable and sidelined. But not everyone was thrilled. A handful of scientists and activists raised concerns. They warned that giving humans such immense power might come back to bite us. What happens, they asked, when someone gets careless or greedy? Their voices, though loud, were drowned out by the roar of progress. After all, who would dare stand in the way of something so groundbreaking? Little did anyone know. Something or someone was already watching. Far above Earth, hidden among the stars, eyes turned toward our planet. These watchers weren't human. They had been observing humanity for years, studying our behavior, noting our advancements. When they saw the railguns, they grew uneasy. To them, this wasn't just another step forward for humanity. It was a red flag. Something needed to be done before things spiraled out of control. Back on Earth, life carried on as usual. People celebrated the railgun as a symbol of human ingenuity. News outlets ran stories praising Dr. Vasquez and her team. School children dreamed of becoming inventors like her someday. Soldiers trained harder than ever, eager to master the new weapon. Everything seemed perfect until cracks began to show. Deep beneath the surface of excitement lay hints of trouble brewing. No one realized it yet, but the balance of power was about to shift in ways no one could predict. For now, though, the world basked in the glow of innovation. Humanity believed. It had reached new heights, proving once again that we could overcome any challenge. But pride has a funny way of blinding us to danger lurking just around the corner. And soon enough, reality would come crashing down in a way no one expected. It was supposed to be just another routine test. On April 14, 2091, the U.S. Navy had gathered a small fleet of ships off the coast of Hawaii for a live fire exercise. The star of the show was a brand new railgun mounted on one of their destroyers. This particular model was sleeker, faster, and more accurate than anything they'd used before. Everyone on board was buzzing with excitement. For the crew, this wasn't just another day at work. It was a chance to witness history in action. The target was an old cargo ship that had been decommissioned years ago. It sat miles away from the destroyer, bobbing gently in the Pacific Ocean. To the sailors, it looked like nothing more than a floating hunk of metal, but soon it would serve as proof of the railgun's unmatched power. As the countdown began, cameras rolled, and officers barked orders into radios. The tension was electric. Everyone wanted to see what this weapon could do. When the railgun fired, the sound was deafening, a sharp crack followed by a low rumble. That shook the air. The projectile streaked across the sky in a blur, leaving behind a faint trail of ionized gas. But something went wrong. Instead of hitting the cargo ship dead center as planned, the slug veered wildly off course. It missed the target entirely and slammed into the ocean near a nearby island where civilians had gathered to watch the demonstration. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but the shock wave from the impact sent waves crashing onto the shore, flooding parts of the beach and sending spectators scrambling for safety. At first, everyone thought it was a malfunction, a glitch in the system. Or maybe human error. The military promised a full investigation, assuring the public that such incidents were rare and would never happen again. News outlets covered the story briefly, focusing mostly on the drama of the near miss rather than the underlying cause. Life moved on, or so it seemed, but then strange things started happening. Over the next few days, scientists monitoring the area around the impact site noticed anomalies. Underwater sensors detected massive disturbances in the ocean floor, movements that didn't match any known seismic activity. Magnetic field readings spiked erratically, creating interference with nearby equipment. At first, researchers chalked it up to natural phenomena caused by the railgun's discharge. After all, firing a hypersonic projectile generates an incredible amount of energy. Surely that could explain the odd readings, right? Wrong. Reports of similar disturbances began pouring in from other parts of the world. In Russia, where railguns had been deployed during training exercises, entire regions experienced unexplained tremors. Villagers spoke of hearing strange hums coming from underground, while livestock grew restless and refused to eat. In China, fishermen reported seeing bizarre lights flickering beneath the waves after a coastal railgun test. Even Antarctica, usually untouched by such events, wasn't spared. Scientists stationed at remote research bases described sudden temperature drops and magnetic storms strong enough to knock out communication systems. By now, alarm bells were ringing loud and clear. Governments scrambled to piece together what was going on. Emergency meetings were held, experts consulted, and theories tossed around. Some suggested the railguns were destabilizing Earth's crust. Others speculated about unknown environmental side effects triggered by the weapon's immense power. No one had a definitive answer, but one thing was certain. Wherever railguns had been used, chaos followed. Then came the satellite images. High-resolution photos taken from orbit revealed patterns too precise to be random. Massive underwater formations appeared overnight near every major railgun testing site. These weren't natural structures. They looked almost geometric, as if carved by some intelligent force. Speculation ran wild. Was it alien activity? Geological upheaval? Or something else entirely? Amidst the confusion, a chilling realization dawned on those paying close attention. Humanity had unleashed something far beyond its understanding. Railguns weren't just powerful weapons. They were keys unlocking forces humanity wasn't ready to handle. Yet even as whispers of doom spread, no one suspected the true nature of the threat, lurking just beyond Earth's atmosphere, not far above the planet. Silent observers watched and waited. They had seen civilizations rise and fall countless times. Before, always marked by the same pattern: unchecked ambition leading to catastrophic consequences. Now, it was humanity's turn to face the reckoning. And when it came, it wouldn't come quietly. A growing sense of unease as weeks turned into months. The strange occurrences only intensified. Coastal towns reported eerie glowing patches in the water that pulsed rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Fishermen swore they saw shadowy shapes moving beneath the surface, too large and too fast to be ordinary sea creatures. Pilots flying over. Affected areas described compasses spinning wildly and navigation systems failing without warning. Rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by social media posts and shaky cell phone videos uploaded by terrified witnesses. Governments tried to downplay the incidents, issuing statements blaming everything from solar flares to underwater volcanic activity. But the public wasn't buying it. Protests erupted outside military bases, housing railgun installations. Environmental groups demanded immediate bans on further testing. Conspiracy theorists claimed the railguns had awakened ancient entities, buried deep within the earth. While most dismissed these claims as nonsense, the fear was real and growing. Behind closed doors, world leaders grappled with mounting pressure. Secret summits were convened, bringing together top scientists, military officials, and diplomats. The question on everyone's mind was simple yet terrifying. What happens next? If railguns really were causing these anomalies, did that mean humanity had crossed a line it couldn't uncross? And if so, who or what was going to hold them accountable? Little did anyone know, the answer was closer than they thought. Hidden among the stars, patient and calculating, the watchers prepared to act. Their message would not be subtle. When it arrived, it would shake humanity to its core and leave no doubt about the stakes of playing with powers beyond our control. It happened without warning, and it hit hard. On July 3, 2091, at exactly 3:17 a.m. UTC, the world went dark. Not just figuratively, literally. Every satellite orbiting Earth stopped working at the same moment. Communication networks collapsed. Phones died mid-call. Internet connections vanished. Planes flying over oceans lost contact with air traffic control. GPS systems failed, leaving drivers stranded on highways and ships adrift at sea. The planet was plunged into chaos. For the first few hours, people didn't know what to think. Was it a cyber attack? A massive solar storm? Some kind of freak accident? Governments scrambled to figure out what had caused the blackout, but their efforts were useless. Without satellites, they couldn't even communicate with each other across continents. It felt like the entire modern world had been pulled out. From under humanity's feet, then came the second wave. Massive objects descended through Earth's atmosphere, glowing orange as they burned through the sky. They weren't meteors or asteroids. They moved too deliberately, too smoothly. Within minutes, these enormous constructs landed across multiple continents. One touched down in the middle of the Sahara Desert. Another appeared in the frozen wastelands of Siberia. A third emerged near the ruins of an ancient city in South America. Wherever they landed, the ground shook violently, sending shockwaves rippling outward for miles. At first, no one dared approach them. These weren't machines built by humans. Their surfaces shimmered with a metallic sheen, but they also seemed alive, pulsating faintly as if breathing. There were no visible doors or windows, just smooth, seamless exteriors that defied logic. Scientists who managed to get close enough to study them reported feeling strange sensations, headaches, nausea, and an overwhelming sense of unease. Something about these things was deeply unsettling. And then the message came. It wasn't broadcast over radios or TVs. It didn't come through speakers or screens. Instead, it entered directly into people's minds, a voice so clear and commanding that it left no room for doubt. Everyone heard it simultaneously, regardless of language or location. "You have disrupted the balance," the voice said. "Your pursuit of destruction has reached a tipping point. You are not ready." The beings calling themselves the Harmonizers explained who they were, or at least gave a vague idea. They claimed to be guardians of sorts, tasked with maintaining equilibrium in the universe. According to them, every civilization goes through phases of growth and decline, but certain thresholds cannot be crossed without consequences. Humanity's development of railguns, they declared, represented one such threshold. By harnessing hypersonic projectiles capable of unleashing catastrophic force, humans had tipped the scales too far. They had shown they were willing to wield power without understanding its cost. The Harmonizers weren't here to destroy humanity, at least not outright. They issued an ultimatum: stop using railguns immediately, dismantle all existing weapons, and abandon further research into similar technologies. If humans refused, the Harmonizers promised to intervene in ways that would make survival nearly impossible. They wouldn't attack directly. Instead, they would manipulate Earth's environment against its inhabitants. As proof of their capabilities, they demonstrated their power almost instantly. In regions where railguns had been tested extensively, the ground began to tremble. Fault lines that had been dormant for centuries suddenly roared to life. Cities perched near tectonic plates crumbled under the force of earthquakes so powerful they split the earth open. Oceans surged inland, swallowing coastal towns whole. Volcanoes erupted without warning, spewing ash and lava across vast stretches of land. Entire ecosystems collapsed overnight as temperatures plummeted or soared uncontrollably. People fled in terror, abandoning their homes and possessions in desperate bids for survival. Families huddled together in makeshift shelters, praying for relief that never came. Governments tried to respond, but their usual tools, military forces, emergency services, infrastructure, were rendered useless. How do you fight an enemy that can turn nature itself against you? Faced with extinction, humanity had no choice but to listen. World leaders convened emergency summits, agreeing to comply with the Harmonizers' demands. Factories producing railgun components were shut down. Research facilities were dismantled. Blueprints and digital records were erased. Soldiers trained to operate the weapons were reassigned to other duties. Overnight, railguns went from being symbols of human ingenuity to relics of a dangerous era. But compliance didn't mean acceptance. While most of humanity struggled to adapt to life under alien oversight, resentment simmered beneath the surface. People whispered about rebellion, about finding a way to fight back. After all, how could anyone trust beings who had the power to wipe out entire civilizations with a flick of their metaphorical wrist? Were they truly guardians, or just another form of oppressor? Amidst this tension, a small group of individuals refused to give up. They believed there was still hope, if not to defeat the Harmonizers outright, and at least to find a way to protect themselves. Operating in secret, they scoured abandoned labs and military bases for scraps of railgun technology. They studied fragments of alien artifacts recovered from crash sites, piecing together clues about how the Harmonizers' tech worked. Slowly, painstakingly, they began developing countermeasures. Their leader was a soldier who had witnessed the devastation firsthand. He had seen cities reduced to rubble, families torn apart, and lives destroyed because of humanity's arrogance and because of the Harmonizers' intervention. To him, surrender wasn't an option. If humanity wanted to survive, it needed to learn from its mistakes, but more importantly, It needed to stand up for itself, but as months passed, the group grew bolder. They knew time was running out. The harmonizers hadn't left Earth entirely. Instead, they remained in orbit, watching and waiting. Their presence loomed large, a constant reminder of humanity's vulnerability. Every day brought new challenges. Food shortages, displaced populations, and the ever-present fear of another environmental catastrophe. Yet despite everything, pockets of resistance continued to thrive. For now, humanity had bowed to the harmonizers' will. Railguns were gone, relegated to history books and cautionary tales. But deep underground, in hidden bunkers and forgotten corners of the world, the seeds of defiance were taking root. And when the time came, they would bloom into something unstoppable. The world had changed. Humanity, once proud and confident in its technological dominance, now lived under the watchful eyes of beings they barely understood. The harmonizers had made their point clear. Any attempt to push boundaries would be met with swift and merciless consequences. Earth's governments, once rivals vying for power, found themselves united by fear. Railguns were gone, dismantled and destroyed as proof of compliance. Factories that once churned out weapons of unimaginable destruction now stood silent, their machinery rusting away. But peace came at a cost. Cities devastated by earthquakes and volcanic eruptions lay in ruins. Entire populations were displaced, forced to flee their homes in search of safer ground. Food shortages became common as farmland was swallowed by floods or scorched by unpredictable weather patterns. Economies crumbled and trust between nations grew fragile. People whispered about whether surrendering to the harmonizers had been worth it. Was survival truly living if it meant bowing to an alien force? For most, life under the harmonizers' rule felt suffocating. Every decision was scrutinized, every action monitored. Satellites belonging to the aliens orbited Earth, scanning for signs of rebellion. Scientists who dared to experiment with advanced technology risked punishment, not just for themselves, but for entire communities. Governments worked tirelessly to enforce these restrictions, fearing another wave of environmental disasters. Yet not everyone accepted this new reality. Among those who refused to give in was a soldier, a man hardened by years of service and scarred by what he had seen during the harmonizers' arrival. He had watched cities fall, families torn apart, and hope crushed under the weight of alien intervention. To him, surrender wasn't an option. Survival meant more than simply obeying orders from above. It meant finding a way to fight back. This soldier wasn't alone. Quietly, he gathered a team of like-minded individuals. Engineers who had worked on railgun projects before they were banned, hackers skilled at bypassing security systems, and even former military personnel disillusioned with the current state of affairs. Together, they formed a secret resistance group operating in the shadows. Their goal wasn't to rebuild railguns that ship had sailed, but to create something entirely new, something capable of standing up to the harmonizers. Operating in secret was no easy task. The alien surveillance network was vast and relentless. Every move the group made carried the risk of exposure. They communicated through encrypted messages, meeting only in remote locations, far from prying eyes. Supplies were scarce and resources limited, but determination kept them going. Each member brought something unique to the table, piecing together fragments of knowledge salvaged from abandoned labs and alien wreckage. Their breakthrough came when they stumbled upon a piece of harmonizer tech left behind after one of their ships crashed in the Australian outback. It was small, a shard-like fragment, no bigger than a human hand, but it pulsed faintly with energy, almost alive. Engineers pored over it day and night, trying to understand how it worked. Slowly, they began unraveling its secrets. The device seemed to manipulate harmonic frequencies, bending natural forces to its will. If they could replicate this technology, they might have a chance. Months of trial and error followed. Failures piled up, each setback testing their resolve. But eventually, they succeeded. The result was a prototype weapon, unlike anything humanity had ever created, a hybrid device combining remnants of railgun tech with insights gleaned from the alien artifact. They called it the pulse cannon. Unlike traditional weapons designed to destroy, the pulse cannon emitted bursts of harmonic energy capable of disrupting the harmonizers' control over Earth's environment. Testing the pulse cannon was risky. They couldn't afford to draw attention, so experiments were conducted in isolated areas deep underground. When activated, the cannon sent out waves of energy that resonated with the planet's magnetic field, temporarily neutralizing the effects of nearby alien constructs. It wasn't perfect, the range was limited, and the energy drain was immense, but it proved one thing. The harmonizers weren't invincible. With their weapon ready, the group turned their attention to the next challenge, getting close enough to use it. The harmonizers hadn't left Earth entirely. Instead, they maintained orbital stations hovering high above the planet. These stations served as command hubs, controlling the alien presence on Earth. If the Resistance could infiltrate one of these stations and deploy the pulse cannon directly against the harmonizer systems, they might stand a chance of breaking free. Planning the mission took weeks. Every detail had to be accounted for, from stealing shuttlecraft capable of reaching orbit to disabling alien defenses without triggering alarms. The odds were stacked heavily against them, but desperation fueled their resolve. They knew failure meant death not just for them, but potentially for all of humanity. On the night of the operation, tension hung thick in the air. The team suited up, checking their gear one last time. No words were exchanged. There was nothing left to say. Each member understood the stakes. This was it, their one shot at freedom. As they boarded the stolen shuttlecraft, engines roaring. To life, none of them looked back. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the possibility of redemption. Behind them stretched a world broken, but not defeated. Whatever happened next, they vowed to face it together. The stolen shuttlecraft roared into the sky, piercing through Earth's atmosphere with a fiery glow. Inside, the small team of rebels sat in silence, their faces pale but resolute under the dim red lights of the cockpit. None of them had ever been to space before, and none expected to make it back alive. But survival wasn't the goal, freedom was. They were carrying humanity's last hope, the pulse cannon, a makeshift weapon cobbled together from scraps of alien tech and human ingenuity. If it worked, they might just have a chance to push back against the harmonizers. If it didn't, well, no one wanted to think about that. Reaching orbit was only the first challenge. The harmonizers' orbital stations weren't exactly welcoming places. These massive structures floated silently above Earth, sleek and metallic, yet pulsating, faintly with an eerie energy. From a distance, they looked almost beautiful, like strange sculptures hanging in the void of space. Up close, though, they were anything but friendly. Armed drones patrolled their perimeters, scanning for intruders. Automated defenses could obliterate anything that got too close. And inside, the harmonizers themselves waited calm, calculating. And utterly unyielding. The rebel team knew they couldn't approach directly. Instead, they used the cover of Earth's shadow to sneak up on one of the stations hovering over the Indian Ocean. Their plan relied on speed and surprise. Once they docked, they would split into two groups. One would head straight for the station's core, where the pulse cannon would be deployed. The other would create distractions, drawing attention away from the main objective. It was risky, sure, but risks were all they had left. Docking was tense. Every movement felt deliberate, every sound amplified in the cramped confines of the shuttle. When the airlock finally hissed open, the rebels exhaled sharply, realizing they'd made it this far without being detected. For now, at least, luck was on their side. Inside the station, the air was cold and sterile, tinged with a faint hum that seemed to vibrate through their bones. The walls shimmered faintly, as if alive, responding to their presence. Alien symbols glowed softly along the corridors, shifting and rearranging themselves in patterns that defied logic. It was disorienting, almost hypnotic. The team stuck close, together, weapons drawn, hearts pounding as they moved deeper into the labyrinthine structure. The first wave of resistance came quickly. Automated sentries, spider-like machines with glowing eyes, dropped from the ceiling, skittering toward them with alarming speed. Shots rang out, echoing through the narrow halls as the rebels fought back. Bullets tore through the sentries. But more kept coming, swarming relentlessly. One by one, members of the distraction team fell, sacrificing themselves to buy time for the others. Each loss hit hard, but there was no turning back now. Every second counted. Meanwhile, the group heading for the core pressed on, dodging patrols and disabling security systems as they went. The pulse cannon was heavy and awkward, its bulk making movement slow and cumbersome. Still, they pushed forward, driven by sheer determination. When they finally reached the central chamber, they found themselves face to face with something unexpected, a massive crystalline structure suspended in midair, radiating waves of harmonic energy. This, they realized, was the heart of the station, the source of the harmonizer's control over Earth. Activating the pulse cannon was easier said than done. The device required precise calibration, and even then, there was no guarantee it would work. As one member tinkered frantically with the controls, the others formed a defensive perimeter, holding off waves of alien drones that poured into the room. The fight was brutal and chaotic, bodies slamming against walls, sparks flying from damaged machinery. Blood floated in globules in the zero-gravity environment, a grim reminder of the cost of their mission. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, the pulse cannon hummed to life. A low-frequency vibration filled the chamber, growing louder and more intense with each passing second. Then, with a blinding flash of light, it fired. Waves of harmonic energy surged outward, colliding with the crystalline structure in a dazzling display of power. The effect was immediate. The station shuddered violently, its systems failing one by one. Lights flickered and died. The hum that had permeated the air faded into silence. Outside, the impact rippled across Earth. Alien constructs on the surface powered down, their menacing glow fading into darkness. Weather patterns stabilized, tectonic activity subsided, and the planet began to heal itself. Humanity had won at least for now, but victory came at a steep price. Of the original team, only a handful survived. Those who did return to Earth as heroes, though they didn't feel much like celebrating. Too many lives had been lost, too much sacrificed. The world hailed them as saviors, but they knew better than anyone how fragile freedom truly was. The harmonizers hadn't been destroyed. They had merely retreated, withdrawing to some distant corner of the galaxy to regroup. No one doubted they would return someday. In the months that followed, humanity struggled to rebuild. Cities rose from the ashes, economies recovered, and trust between nations slowly began to mend. Railguns remained banned, relics of a dangerous era best left forgotten. But in secret labs and hidden bunkers, work continued. Scientists studied fragments of alien tech, searching for ways to defend against future threats. Governments quietly prepared contingency plans, knowing another reckoning might be inevitable. For now, though, Earth was free. The skies were clear, the oceans calm, and the ground steady beneath people's feet. Survivors vowed never to forget the lessons learned during those dark days. Power, they realized, wasn't just about strength, it was about responsibility. Progress needed to come hand in hand with caution, ambition tempered by humility. Otherwise, history was doomed to repeat itself years later. Archaeologists exploring the ruins of the orbital station uncovered a message scrawled on one of its walls. Written hastily in chalk, likely by someone in the rebel team during their final moments. It read, "Power is not strength, it is responsibility. Let us remember." It became a rallying cry for generations to come, a reminder of the fine line between innovation and destruction. Humanity had stared into the abyss and lived to tell the tale. Whether they would heed the warning remained to be seen. But for now, they stood united, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.